Welcome, everybody, to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde, and if you are anything like me, you're probably a guitar geek. You've come to the right place. Today, we have one of two great interviews we're sharing this week. I'm talking to Copenhagen-based guitarist Mikkel Ploug. If Mikkel's name seems familiar to you, it's because we featured him on our website back during the COVID lockdown. He was playing these beautiful melodies on his balcony, and we had it on our website. Mikkel is up to an even wilder project, and we are happy to announce we're sharing it on the Fretboard Journal's YouTube channel. Mikkel has arranged and played J.S. Bach's Art of the Fugue on the unlikeliest of instruments, a 1961 Gibson 330. He's playing it through a Magnatone M-14 amp, and it sounds utterly beautiful. He showed me the video, asked me if I wanted to share it on the Fretboard Journal channel. Of course, I said yes. And then, of course, I wanted to hear the whole story about how he went about this project. Mikkel is up to so many interesting things. We go a lot deeper than just this one track. We talk about working with a composer. We talk about the European jazz scene and so much more. I hope you enjoy it. I learned a lot. I think you will too. Before we get to that, I just want to thank our sponsors this week, and they are Seattle's Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar, where the Magnatone that Mikkel used came from. Peghead Nation, my favorite music instruction portal around. Stringjoy Strings, I told you they had mandolin strings. They now have 5-string banjo strings as well as acoustic and electric guitar strings. And our friends at StewMac are also sponsoring the show. And then I guess I should also say the Fretboard Summit, our big guitar conference. You're going to hear all about it next week. It takes place August 23rd, 25th, 2024 in Chicago at the Old Town School. You can still register at fretboardsummit.org, but I urge you to hurry up. We're locking everything in. Lots of moving pieces. By getting a 3-day pass now, you'll be able to attend everything, including the exclusive Blake Mills Joe Henry show that is just for 3-day pass attendees. Go to fretboardsummit.org, sign up. You will thank me later. Last but not least, our 54th issue of the Fretboard Journal is out now. I'm super excited to see all the posts on Instagram from our subscribers who've been getting it. If you want to be one of those people who gets the Fretboard Journal delivered straight to your door, go to fretboardjournal.com, click on the subscribe button. You can add current issue. That's going to get you this new issue, which has Peter Rowan and Margaret Glaspie and so many incredible stories in it. A lot of folks are saying it's one of their favorite issues. I love reading that. We're already hard at work on our 55th and 56th issue. That's just how it goes when you're in the magazine biz. But keep the subscriptions coming. Keep telling your friends. And thank you, as always, for tuning in to the Fretboard Journal podcast. Again, today's guest, Mikkel Ploug. You're going to want to go to our YouTube channel to watch his arrangement of the Art of the Fugue for guitar. Then you're going to want to listen to this interview and immerse yourself in this wild world of European jazz. And Mikkel's story is just so cool. We have another interview, like I said, this week coming in just a couple of days. But thanks, as always, for tuning in to the Fretboard Journal podcast. Mikkel, thanks for joining us. We've showcased your music on our website before and some of your videos that have been just truly amazing. But for folks who are maybe just getting wind of you, tell us where you are right now and let's get a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I studied in Holland. That's why I did like my jazz studies. And then very soon I made a debut album in 2007, playing with Mark Turner, the American saxophonist. And we went on tour in Europe. I booked a 17-date tour around Europe. And I remember thinking at the time that next time I'd definitely like to do a month. So that never happened. But since then, we toured a lot and we played with Mark in many of these places around, like jazz clubs around Europe. And I sort of built a following and a relationship to many of these venues. So I've been working internationally since sort of I finished in Holland in 2006 and making different projects, making different groups. But the last years, I've mainly been doing solo stuff and working with my trio Equilibrium with Estey-era Pedersen from Norway and Joachim Badenhorst from Belgium. And with my trio, I have a classic trio guitar trio with drums and bass with Jeppe Skovbak, a Danish bass player, and Sean Carpio. And we tour a lot in Europe. We were just in Ireland last month doing a week of gigs, and we have some festival gigs this summer. So yeah, and then I have I've lately developed an obsession with playing classical music on the electric guitar. And I've been working with the Danish Gravemeyer Award winning composer, who's I'm like his biggest fan, Bent Sørensen. He's an incredible composer, and I have been working on his nocturnes and his choir pieces, and trying to see if I could turn them into music that sort of fits on the guitar, even though it's not written at all for the guitar.
Yeah.
So
I want to circle back to that, but before we get into what you're working on right now, the European jazz scene is sort of its own thing, and the Dutch jazz scene. I mean, there's in the U.S., a friend of mine, Kevin Whitehead, wrote a book called New Dutch Swing years ago. He's an NPR jazz critic, and it was about Misha Mengelberg and the entire Dutch jazz scene.
yeah.
How does someone growing up where you grew up get into jazz? I mean, is it part of the culture there? Because it seems like it's a little different than what in America we have.
Oh, absolutely. I think of that so often when I hear interviews with my heroes, and everybody that come on your podcast, and they tell their story. And I always feel like there's this major difference, because really I did not grow up in a jazz environment. There were nobody around who could play guitar better than me when I was like 12 or 13. I was like, I never heard anybody really play guitar. There was just no one around.
What got you into it?
So, well, I mean, my father is a guitarist. He's an amateur guitarist. And my mother plays piano. She's a amateur classical pianist. So there was always music in the house. And early on, I was playing drums at the age of 4. And I had a private teacher who would come to the house. And that was my hobby. That was my toy. It was just fun to go and practice drums every day. I loved that. I would play along with records. It would just be like practicing bossa nova beats when I was 7. I was so into it, but I never considered it anything. I was the only one doing it, but I don't know. I saw a guy play the drums once and it caught my attention. So the guitar came a little bit later. And I remember asking my guitar teacher, because I was hearing, actually, my link into the jazz world was through computer music. I was part of the Amiga, if you know that computer, that scene of people like sending discs to each other and composing on the computer. And people were sampling small fragments and making like the weirdest kind of music. Somebody was making techno. I was into that. I was into the people who were making jazz. It was a really vibrant scene.
I don't want to get personal, but how old are you? You're talking about sending discs back and forth, and I don't know whether you mean like old floppy disks or CDs or what.
Old floppy disks, yes. And This is like when I was 15, and getting, a letter every 3rd month from this guy in Finland, who then we were then having these long letters and conversations about music and life and philosophy and everything. And he said, well, go and check out Sun Ra, John Coltrane, Miles Davis. You might like some of this. So I went to the local library and I started getting CDs. And this went on in my teenage years. But it was just me and one friend who was like a little bit interested, but mainly it was just me and my computer connections geeking out about Sun Ra. And from that, I found Bill Frisell's first album, or not his first record, but This Land. I heard that. And I went to see Bill Frisell play when I was 17. And that was the first time I saw like a real jazz guitarist. So pretty good start with Frisell,
There are jazz clubs around you, right? It wasn't part of your world?
Not in my hometown. And even though I'm just like, for a person in the US, like I'm just 40 minutes away from Copenhagen. We wouldn't go. It wouldn't be a thing. Copenhagen was like this big place. You don't necessarily go and see jazz. So when I got a little bit older, I went all the time. But in those years, 15, 16, that was all I could get was records from the library. That's where I got everything from. Didn't have a mentor, didn't have a great teacher who could tell me like, do this. It all had to come from the little information you could, dig out somewhere.
Yeah. Did you end up, you're obviously the internet was far enough along that you were able to have these sort of far-flung pen pals and network that way. Were you able to find instruction online or a
Well,
tutorial or books or anything?
no, this was before the internet. This
Okay.
was the floppy disk was being sent by mail. So it
Okay.
was really like it could be a 3 month wait until something happened. The internet, I remember, arrived when I started conservatory in Holland in '99.
Okay.
So I really grew up without this access to videos and the internet. But when I came to Holland, it was a whole new thing. Then I all of a sudden, I remember Kurt Rosenwinkel did a workshop in 2000. I went around Ireland. He played gigs in Ireland, and I went there and I traveled around to see all the gigs, the whole, so like 5 concerts all over the country
Yeah.
with mini disc recordings. That was the thing of the time. You put up mini discs. So whenever Americans would come through either Copenhagen or Amsterdam or The Hague, I would go and record them and I would transcribe the mini discs. Sounds so ancient now.
Hey, you've got to
But
do what you
yeah,
got to do. How far from
yeah.
Amsterdam were you?
Well, The Hague is just 1 hour from Amsterdam. So I grew up with the BIM House, which is this amazing concert venue in Amsterdam, and I saw so many people play there. That's been incredible to be able to go there and see everybody.
That scene is its own thing. Like in the New York, there was the Knitting Factory back in the day. And that, like I said, that book by Kevin Whitehead that I hope is still in print. I'm not sure. Misha Mengelberg, Han Bennick, all
Yes.
these incredible and very adventurous musicians who sort of threw all the playbook out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but the Amsterdam scene was also an incredibly international scene. So many of the people I work with today in the various groups I play in, we connected around The Hague because there were people from all over the place, from China, from the US, from everywhere.
Yeah.
It was a very international school in that way. So yeah.
As a European-based jazz musician today, I mean, it's hard to make a living as a musician anywhere, but you're able to tour and do these European jazz venues and make it work?
Absolutely. But I'm doing a lot of stuff. I also occasionally play on non-jazz venues. Like I play solo concerts I've played a couple of classical festivals with some of the material I do. I I work with the Basel Theatre for 1 week with a duo dance and guitar performance that I've created together with Tilman O'Donnell, who's an American choreographer and dancer. But mainly the work I do is touring and playing my own groups around Europe, yes. But
That's amazing.
it's a lot of different countries. You gotta, very often a tour contains a couple of countries, let's put it that way.
Sure. Well, they're so
Yeah.
close together.
Exactly, right? And we grew up at the times where travel was very cheap. And yeah, as I said, I started in Holland, sort of lived in Copenhagen. I also lived in Berlin for a little while. So yeah, it seems very natural to travel through all these European countries and perform a little bit in Italy, perform in France, in Spain, and around Europe like that. Yeah.
And where are you now?
I'm in Copenhagen.
You're in
I've been
Copenhagen.
living here with my family for the last good 13 years. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever spoken to a European jazz artist, but there's something about, and I just shouldn't make generalizations because I'm sure you have every facet and style, but going back to like early Frizzell, there's an ECM records, there's sort of a spaciousness, there's a little more breathing room, it seems like, with a lot of contemporary jazz from Europe than what you would get here. Do you have thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Many thoughts on that, actually. Like recently, I thought a lot about where do I actually come from? Because of this, we just talked about, like the story is often in the US, you grow up in a jazz environment. There's all these people you look up to. They take you under the wing and give you a sort of training or help. And since we don't have that often in Europe, I was thinking about what are my musical roots? And I realized that we grew up with this tradition of the Danish songbook. We have this blue book that contains around 500 songs that are being brought out at like family gatherings. And my family would meet always on Sunday, like every second week. And then we sing some of these songs. And I used to think it was like incredibly boring. But a lot of these tunes then sort of come back in my later years now to, I almost say they haunt me. They're like amazing pieces of music that I neglected at the time. But the more I look into it now, I realize that's where I got like the harmony I hear from. And many of them are actually written by some of the greatest classical Danish composers we've had, who also had a talent for writing very simple, like folk type melodies. But some of them are folk songs in this book. They're really folk songs that's been traveling from generation to generation, and some of them are linked to some German ancestors. But then there's also some stuff in there that's really Danish, and it's different from Swedish folk music or Norwegian folk music. So I think there's a generalization that all European cultures grow up with a little bit of that. Maybe not as much as in Scandinavia, and that is probably the reason why you have all this space, because many of these songs are like kind of religious and really, they're not reels or jigs, like from like bluegrass folk type music. They're really like calm, minor, often really slow moving pieces, hymn-like songs. And I think that's my heritage. I just never knew until recently.
Yeah.
So
Is this
I think,
songbook is this songbook that your family, I mean, it sounds so unusual probably for folks in the States at least, to hear that this would go on once a month or with, extended family. Are these songs in the songbook things that any of your peers would know? Like everybody had this book?
yeah, that's the crazy thing. It's like really a thing that transcends generations, even. Like the kids and my grandparents, they know the same tunes. And there's a couple of songs that just everybody in this country knows them. You even sing them when people get together for, like my daughter went to this big gym thing, and there's like 2,000 people in a hall, and then we sing one of these like really slow lullaby-ish hymns together. And everybody knows it. It's like we have a couple of hundred national anthems, actually.
That's amazing. Have you
So,
done much with that music and making that in a more modern jazz setting?
yes, I did this album called Balcony Lullabies,
Yeah.
which came in the lockdown periods. A lot of what people would do and what helped, I guess, as a sort of salvation or help for everybody was to sing these songs together. It became such a big thing in all over Denmark. So there was all these gatherings of people singing together. And one of the things I did was I played every night on my balcony for the neighbors, and lately also, or for online through Facebook video. And when I was doing those arrangement of those songs, I realized I could really mix everything I had been working on in the jazz world into these songs without destroying, I think, both. And Frisell was a big in on that, because there's no song too, small or silly that he cannot play and make into a beautiful piece of art. So every time I was like, I cannot play this tune, then I thought about that. I was like, well, if Frisell was doing it, it would sound great. So if you love the
Yeah.
song, why not play it? So I was playing all these children's songs, and I still do today when we do both trio gigs. Also, when I do my solo program, I play children's lullabies. I play Bach. I play modern music by Bent Sørensen. I squeeze it all into one concert.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the lockdown happened, John Thomas wrote about your balcony performances for us, and we shared some video from that, and
yeah.
it was
Thanks.
amazing.
Yeah,
I guess the funny thing about you interpreting those tunes is everyone in your part of the world knows those tunes and will have like their own viewpoint, but everyone here is like never heard any of these compositions before. So it's all original.
that's true.
We
It's
have no
true.
bias one way or the other. Yeah.
This is funny when I tour with it, because I was playing some clubs in Germany and I realized, oh, I won't have this effect that when I start the tune, people are going to go, oh, he's playing like the song we sing every day. So, yeah, that is curious. It's true.
You are an original voice doing very unique forms of jazz and classical music. And one of the things that's striking, and we first reported it back during the lockdown, is you're also using sort of they're traditional instruments. They are traditional guitars, but not
Yes.
the guitar that you would think would be playing contemporary jazz or jazz trio. Like you sort of, I mean, and this certainly translates to the Bach project, which we're going to talk about, but you seem to gravitate towards unique vintage instruments. Is that correct?
Yes, unfortunately. But I think there's one difference when I look at other guitarists. They often have, they have so many guitars. It seems to be like the rule that if you're a guitarist, you have a lot of guitars. And I seem to be one of the people who just have a few. I got three main instruments, and it's my old Gibson Bannerhead from 44 and my main electric Gibson 330 from 61.
Yeah.
And I've been sitting with those guitars for many years and making tiny adjustments. Like even this morning, I went to a luthier and had the frets just, taken a little bit of the edges. And there's a few adjustments that have been made to them, but really, I think I've just been like working with them, playing with them. And I tried many of the European luthiers that are popular at the moment, and hand-built, beautiful luthier instruments. But there's something about those vintage Gibsons, at least for me, that has that extra thing that nobody can explain what is.
Mm-hmm.
It can be rough at first. You can be a bit like, wow, why does the tone do this? Or, I mean, there are definitely more perfect instruments around, but I think they have. For me, I haven't met anything that has character like this warm, deep tone you can get out of them.
Yeah. Well, and for anyone who's listening to this and going like, Jason, a 330 is not an unusual instrument for a jazz musician. You're playing Bach on the Gibson 330. It's a little,
that's true.
You are a little adventurous. How did you find going back to the Banner? Because our mutual friend John Thomas wrote that book, Kalamazoo Gals, about those. But that's
Oh yeah.
You don't usually think of Gibson flat tops of that era in a contemporary instrumental jazz setting. So what was it about? How did you find that guitar first? And then what was it about it that spoke to you?
Yeah, I was on tour in the US in 2016 with my trio Equilibrium, and we were playing some festivals, and we were going to Canada as well. And I knew I wanted to try to find a steel string guitar that had something. I didn't know what I was looking for at all. So what I did was I went to all the shops in New York. And of course I end up at Retro Fret.
Yeah, sure.
Because the collection there is like ridiculous. And I started taking down instruments from the wall without looking at like prices or sizes or anything. I was completely open, and all these experts would come up in the shops and tell me, oh, this is from that area. Oh, you're looking for this type. And I just had no idea. I was just looking for a sound. And I had many good guitars, but this one guitar just really stood out. And I realized later that it's because the deck is mahogany. It's not a spruce top. So that I tried, I think, 8 other LG 1 and 2 from this sort of same period, and they were all with spruce tops, and they were great. But this one mahogany top was just had something else. So I remember I couldn't take it with me at the time, so I went back over to Europe, and I just couldn't stop thinking about this guitar. So I had like a sort of a long distance relationship with it. And I was writing the guys from Retrofret, like, could you have it on hold for me, please? Like 1 more month. And then I asked, I remember, could you send me like just somebody playing it?
Yeah.
Just do a Zoom or like a little recording of somebody playing it.
Just to remind you of its uniqueness.
Yes, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to use this because it's such a different attack. I mean, I play with a huge 2 mm rounded off pick. That's kind of what I do, which is very unusual I don't know anyone else who plays with a big block like that, want to come at
like a Django Reinhardt kind of thing, like a thick. Yeah.
Yeah, like a thick 207 jazz pick, but like even like when they come out of the box, I do a lot of like
Scuffing.
yeah, just so they're really round.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was like, this, I'm not gonna be able to use this recording. But then it arrived and I could just tell that tone is amazing. He was just like strumming one chord and then, oh my God, oh yeah. So I was like, I'll put down the money, get it over, get it to me. And it arrives, and surely enough, like even though it was a half a year later, I came out of the box and I couldn't believe like it's not the biggest and broadest and most like piano type tone, but I think this guitar has this controlled warmth and mid that's just so beautiful. Yeah. So I started like throwing different techniques at it and just trying to see what sounds are in this instrument. And that became my first album, Alleviation, which was like an exploration of that guitar in every sense, you know.
What was the guitar that you had prior to that? What was your acoustic, if you had even any?
I had a Taylor Jumbo for a while.
Okay.
Yes, it's like
Little different
completely different.
sound. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was just on the wall. I got it in a shop in Holland when I was, yeah, 20 years old. And I was like, wow, this sounds like a huge instrument. But I could never really dig into it. It wasn't, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't have anything special, I thought. So
And the Gibson the flat top, the banner, it still comes out and you're still like it's still unlocking things for you.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm at the moment I'm playing these Bach fugues on it and seeing if I can like get it to sustain by using some lighter strings. But there's something magical with that guitar with lighter strings. You can really get a lot of sustain from it. It's almost like sounds like it could be an electric instrument. So I'm exploring that at the moment. Yeah.
Speaking of electric instruments, we're sharing a video that you did of the Bach, one of the Bach fugues, on the 330 through a Magnatone.
Through a Magnatone, yes, a Magnatone amp from '64, I believe, the M-14 Estey that has the vibro, the two tens, or sorry, the two eights,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, it's such a unique configuration. And I just thought that amp and my 330 really lent themselves to playing Bach for some reason.
Yeah, I'm curious about this because you said you bought the amp from Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle,
Yeah.
and were you here? Did you buy that in person?
This is another tour story. I was on tour playing with my trio at the Rochester Jazz Festival in upstate New York in 2018. Went to a guitar shop, heard this Magnatone amp, and it was another thing I couldn't stop thinking about it. So 4 years later, I saw one come up at like I think it was a Black Friday offering, and it just appeared there on Reverb, and I thought, oh, I have to see if there's something about that sound. Again, I just remembered the sound I heard from that amp. So they shipped it over, I bought it, and sure enough, it's like, what a sound. I think they're incredibly underrated amplifiers, those old Magnatones.
Yeah, there can't be many Magnatones floating around where you live.
None. And now when I do gigs, like, can I ask for one? Of course not. If I, if people ask what kind of amp you like, well, a Magnatone M-14 is stay. Nope, it's not gonna happen.
That's commitment because you must have to have a transformer and some adapter and all sorts of
Ye-
stuff.
Absolutely. I needed an amp tech to actually go through the whole amp. There was a lot of things that had sort of fallen apart in the transportation, so it needed a lot of not a lot of work. But it's become an obsession with me to follow sound ideas to the end. So from adjusting the pick to adjusting the strings to, the like every little element gets explored until,
Yeah.
yeah, forever.
You mentioned the frets, so what else have you been like obsessing over recently
Yeah,
on that front?
actually, well, everything. Cables, um, pedals, but especially how pedals sound, not the effect they do, but how they change your signal. So there's, for example, this one Maxon analog delay that I like to run into, but not necessarily adding the delay, but just going through that pedal sounds great. Does something to the tone. It's just a make things better pedal. And I had 3 of them now. Some of them broke, but like the Maxon analog delay.
So there's something in the bypass that is just adds some secret sauce.
Yeah, there is, and my bass player Jeppe Skovbakke, he says it's the same thing for bass. It just makes things sound better. Whatever it is, running through that pedal is like a little magic boost of
but
the good
not
frequencies.
With it on. You don't have any.
Well, I love the delay also. I use the delay, but I even prefer if I just have a clean sound, I still go through that pedal.
Interesting.
And then I've changed the bridge on the 330 I have because of the materials. I wanted to try if solid steel would be better than the old combination of what I guess it's zinc and some other materials Gibson was using. And I did find that it made a huge difference, actually. It brought out more sustain and more thickness to the tone of the 330. So I've kept that one. I have gone through so many string brands. I've even had like custom strings made from a string maker in the UK to see if I thought my ideal set was like in between a 11 and a 12. But now I'm stuck with John Pierce 12s. They're like my go-to brand. And for the picks, I use the blue chip picks, and I've sort of tried many different models. And also, as I was saying, like using micro mesh to adjust them a little bit. So yeah, it's just endless little details.
I love you're sort of like the guy who has the one Land Cruiser or Land Rover and just keeps modifying the one car as opposed to accumulating a quiver of cars.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yes. And I realized I love the idea of having many guitars. Of course, I'm a guitarist. I love it. But I think I could just do with the one 330, for the rest of my life. That instrument is, yeah. I love it more and more.
Yeah. So you couldn't have known this, that the 330 and the or maybe you did, the 330 through the Magnatone lent itself. What came first, the obsession over the Bach fugues or that guitar amp setup?
The obsession with the Bach fugues, which came from working with composer Bent Sørensen. His music led me into Bach in a way that made me hear Bach in a way I haven't heard it before. And then I was playing it on my usual setup, and I thought the way the individual voices would come out could be stronger somehow. And then I tried the Magnatone. It was also one of the reasons why I bought it without hearing it. I had an idea that it might do something. So this vibro between 2 speakers, I think, is not the same as doing it with a pedal. And it sort of mimics, in my head, a harpsichord a little bit. Harpsichord has this sort of wild, you hear a tone, and goes like, and a little bit of that vibration, vibro between those 2 channels. And somehow the voices were able to come out clearer with the setup. So who wouldn't knew that like the rock and roll vintage setup from the 60s is a good idea, I think, at least, to play Bach fugues.
Yeah. I mean, there's something, you capture that spirit somehow. And I hadn't thought about the 2 speakers and all that, but yeah, that I'm sure live, if you're standing in front of the amp, it's even far more dramatic than listening through these tiny computer speakers, as most of us do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you go with this? I mean, you've got a couple of guitars that are both pretty specialized to you, or you're the only person I know in a jazz setting kind of going through this setup. Where do you go on the Bach thing? Are you going to go even deeper into that catalog?
Absolutely. I think there's going to be some kind of album there. Because I think the mix between, at the moment, the mix between Bach and the new classical music by Bent Sørensen is amazingly interesting because it's, in my world, it's really almost the same thing. But they really belong in different categories. But I see it as the perfect melt, for example, on an album. So I could imagine an album of like half modern composer, from today, Nordic composer music, and Bach pieces. That's one thing I imagine with it. But for the moment, I'm playing a lot of the partitas as well, the violin partitas, and seeing if I can find a voice for that on that instrument, if I can find a sound. And some of them, I think there's something happening. There's another way. There's another catalog of people doing it, which makes it really interesting, I think. Because I listen to all these, I listen to classical violinists playing the partitas. So I go with some of the modern ones, and I go with some of the early music interpreters. And the early music interpreters, I think, they really have something interesting when you translate some of that way of playing Bach to an electric guitar. You can't do the same things, but I think you can definitely learn and take from it. And it sounds great on the guitar, I think. It's like, and this, for me, it sounds like also a territory that I haven't really heard anyone do that. Like play early music interpretations of Bach on an electric guitar. So it feels a little bit like, oh, maybe I can go over here and find something else, find another way into this music. So I just love that exploration.
So you've got these two Gibsons, the one acoustic flat top from the war era, and then the 330. Do you find that the electric lends itself better to these early pieces, these Bach pieces?
I mean, there's something about being able to play really fluid that definitely works well with some of the Bach material, because it's so difficult. Some of it really is so challenging. And in a way, I think, on a guitar, you can be much clearer than on many of the instruments that this music is traditionally performed on. Like a violin is, fairly squeaky. You need to like dig into the notes. Yes, they have a lot of other qualities over the electric guitar, but finding what the electric guitar has to offer with this music is, for me, like super exciting. And yeah, I think for some of the fugues, there's some register issues also with the partitas. Like I like at the moment to do the partitas, I play up really, really high on the 330, like up in the area we normally would avoid. Like that's where I'm playing all day at the moment. I'm like trying to see, is there some sound there? That I think that there's really some amazing stuff in that register that we don't use so much as guitarists,
And what is the sweet spot on the amp settings and the guitar knobs to kind of get close enough to the harpsichord sound without sounding like you're making fun of it or anything?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much in the middle. Like everything just,
Okay.
a little bit of volume. I go on the normal setting on the amp, not the mellow. It has a mellow setting, which is very beautiful also, but the normal brings out a bit of the top end. And then I just add a bit of the vibro. Like I don't overdo it. I just add a little bit of it in so that the sound travels between the two channels. But maybe at first glimpse, you wouldn't even notice that there's actually this vibro going on.
Yeah.
So sort of not too much of anything.
The famous pitch shifting vibrato Magnatone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't beat it.
So as a touring musician, this must open up not only all the jazz festivals and jazz clubs, but I imagine some of the more adventurous classical music programming, right?
I hope so. I've been touching a little bit on it. Like I've played some guitar festivals in Denmark, but I yet have to. There are talks. I'm in talks with some promoters, but there's also the risk of falling in between everything. And that's a little bit what's been happening with I have a whole project where I play Bent Sørensen's music, and it's hard to sell because I'm so excited about it. And for me, he's like one of the best composers, one of the most amazing composers to ever live. And I play his music for years. But when I go to a jazz promoter, they're a bit like, yeah, okay, so you're playing this classical composer. Why? So, and the classical festivals are a bit like, you're not a classical musician, even though you play this repertoire. But I can't help it.
Yeah.
I just sit with this stuff and work on it day in and day out. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
Tell
see
me
if I can.
more about this composer, because I'm guessing most of the people listening to this podcast have never heard of this person.
Yes, Bent Sørensen is probably the most recognized Danish composer of our times, and he got the Gravemeyer Award. And his piece "Evening Land" was performed in New York by the New York Philharmonic in 2018. His music is often very spacious, and especially if you're not familiar with his work, his piano nocturnes is an incredible place to start, I think. That's where I got completely blown away. One person has says, and let's see if I can translate this quote correctly, would be like, it sounds like the most amazing music you've never heard. And am I saying that right? Well, anyways, it's like, it's in a way, Bent Sørensen's music seems very familiar, but it also sends you places that are just like unknown. He really has a sound. It's
And how do we spell his name?
Bent Sørensen is Bent-Sø, the Danish O with like a slash through it, and Søren, Rensen.
Yeah, I'll include that in the notes so people can dig it up. Is this person like a national hero at this point in your country?
Yeah,
Okay.
he is, but there's also a lot of people who are like, oh, he's the one who's writing, all this crazy music. He's not a classical composer or a necessarily like, oh, he wrote this piece and that piece for Denmark, but he's definitely like I would say almost more known outside of Denmark.
Okay.
And I commissioned him to write a guitar piece for me. So he wrote a piece for the Bannerhead, which was like for me an absolutely amazing experience. Because here's like I've been playing his music for years, but then I got a chance to actually sit with him and talk about guitars and talk about what about writing something for a steel string guitar with plectrum. And he was totally into it. So he wrote this piece that I'll perform in the autumn, which is called Bannerhead Fantasia.
Okay.
And it's sort of written for the Bannerhead Gibson.
And where are you going to debut that?
For the Danish Guitar Society, which is mainly a group of classical musicians, actually, who have formed like the Danish Guitar Society. And I'll perform at a concert for them.
I think you're probably the first person I've ever interviewed who's worked with a composer and commissioned a piece for their guitar work. I mean, obviously a lot of guitarists write their own material, and you've done that too.
Yeah.
What was that experience? I mean, I kind of am like trying to rack my brain. Is this like going to a tailor and getting a suit made? Like what, or giving an AI prompt to, spit out some paragraph? What do you tell a composer? Obviously, they can dig up your music and get a sense of your direction. What do you give them? Is there back and forth, or is it, the composer's final word is the final word? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, the process was absolutely for me was incredible because as I pointed out, like he is my main musical hero at the moment and inspiration. And so, but because we had a relationship working towards this, because I was playing so much of his music, so I would bring the albums, I would bring the sketches, and I had so many questions for him. So I was basically just like milking him for information. And in that process, we became friends and had a lot of talks about music. So when it came down to to it. It was actually something he said. He was listening back to my versions of his piano nocturnes, and he suggested, well, maybe I should write something sometime for that guitar. And I was like, yes. So the process was that he was sort of waiting for a little while, and all of a sudden he sent me 10 bars. So here I have the first 10 bars of this piece in front of me, and I start playing it. And I'm like, oh wow, these are awesome, beautiful chords, and oh, this is happening. But I had no clue where he was going. And then I thought, he's probably, next time I get something from him, it will probably go here. Like I had maybe 2 or 3 versions in my head of where it could go. And then he sends me the next 10 bars or 5 bars, and it's something completely different that I could never have imagined. There are even moments I remember him sending like 4 bars of something, me playing through it and going, oh, he's probably going to go to an E flat now on the next bar. I was trying to guess, like,
Sure.
where is he going with this?
Sure.
And then the next material arrives, and it's like, whoa, okay, I could not see that. I could totally not see that. So I had my mind blown like over and over and over in this process with little fragments arriving. And I would immediately like throw everything I had in my hands. When a new fragment had arrived, I would like run and close the door, like, kids, watch TV, do something. I need to do this. And then I would sit and go like, okay, so this is what I have now in my hands. And the piece sort of is constructed of 4 different sections where there is some like fugal, really beautiful, soft Bach type stuff. There's also a really fast line that's just relentlessly ongoing, 32 bars of just 16 notes. And there is like a theme being developed that sounds like a jazz waltz almost in the beginning. So it has all these different characters in play. And yeah, so it was super fascinating.
And does the composer Sørensen, what is his primary instrument that he writes with?
He writes in his head. He's like real composer.
He's not a horn. It's not string set. He doesn't favor one, or he didn't start out with one. No.
He goes to his space and he takes out paper and he writes.
Okay.
He has a little like almost toy-like piano that he can check stuff on, but it's not being used. So he writes everything in his head.
So he's writing this in his head. He's delivering it to you. Were there any portions where you're like, this is just impossibly difficult? Or was this a rather, I have to imagine there were some things that were either really simple or really complex that he didn't even know on guitar. Yeah.
And this was the luxury, because a lot of the stuff he writes are for larger examples. He's writing an opera now for the Swedish and the Copenhagen and Oslo opera, Norwegian opera. So obviously they can't go and like check out stuff with Bent. But this piece, I would like call him up and say, Bent, can we just meet about these bars? And he was cool enough to come over, and I could play him like, do you think this works the best? Or there is even a couple of notes where I asked him, could I add this note in the chord? Are we going to lose something if I add in this open D? Because of just, how it would be on the guitar, how it'd be comfortably to moving on the guitar. But there's nothing I love more than a challenge, like getting something that seems unplayable. Like all these piano nocturnes are written for 10 fingers. So to translate them into basically 4 fingers on the guitar is like such a wonderful challenge, I think. You look at it at a bar of music and you go, this is not really possible. And then a month later, you're like, I think I found the solution,
How long is the Bannerhead piece?
It's just 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Yeah.
Given the title, did he know anything about the history of those guitars? Did you give him a brief description of the uniqueness of the instrument and who made it, or any of that stuff?
Yeah. I told him the story, and that's where the title came from also. Yes.
So is there, if you listen closely enough, can you get a sense of wartime era and World War II and maybe women toiling away on these guitars?
Well, there's definitely everything Sørensen writes, it's very often you have the PPP or the PP, like pianissimo, pianissimo, like super, super soft, which is very important to his music. Space and silences and just really, really low volume. So it's very tender. There's very careful bits. There's also some big chords in there. So it has a bit of everything. I'd say this piece.
Is he almost like Arvo Pärt in Estonia, like tapping into that melancholy and that folk sensibility, but for your culture?
Definitely the melancholy, but harmonically, he's like way more out there.
Yeah.
Like harmonically, I used to think of his music like every second note is a surprise to me.
Yeah.
If you hear how he does his voice leading and his inner voice, it's like, where does he get it from? He really goes out there. Some wild choices that make perfect sense, but it's harmonically it's dense. It's really dense.
Yeah. I think for most of us, we paint this picture of composers being in some ivory tower or in some loft where they're just unapproachable. It sounds like you're having coffee with him and like going back and
Yeah.
forth on moments of the song and everything. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is, especially when I would suggest like, oh, Ben, can we add this note? And he's like, oh yeah, oh, you want to add that? Yeah, sure, add that in. And then afterwards, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said that because he just says yes. Maybe I've ruined the piece now because he's such a nice guy. And yeah, no, but that's also being, I think, in Denmark. It's a small country. He lives just up the road from where I am. So, one of my first encounters was with him was he needed a bass for his wife's son's audition. His wife's son plays guitar, and he
Okay.
needed a bass because the bass player didn't have a bass. So he called me. So I was like, Mikkel, can you get me a bass? And I was, of course, on the corner with a bass for him. So yeah, it's just very down to earth here in Denmark, I guess.
I guess
Great Mile
so.
Award or not.
Have a $1 million question. Have you played the Bannerhead composition on the 330? Does it go that way too?
I was just doing it this afternoon, actually, because I realized that maybe I could pull some twang out of some of some of the stuff that's very fugal and very moving, like like very classical. I thought, what if I drag out the sort of chord structures in it? So you get these like, and that had a sound as well. So I think there's got to be I'm gonna have to do an electric version of the piece for
Yeah,
sure.
it's like a
Yeah,
remix.
yeah, that's the remix. Yeah, it's true.
Amazing. All of your studies on Bach, do you ever have plans to share those transcriptions or help others navigate that daunting world?
Well, I haven't written anything down, so that would be
Okay.
I do everything by also with Sørensen's music. I learn it by heart, and then I never look at the music again. So I hope to actually do a book on my guitar pieces at some point because I realized they all represent like a study. I didn't think about it when I was writing them, but like one is a tone production study, one is a stretch voicing study that turned into a composition, one is a right hand fluidity study, and they all just became pieces of music. That's a tendency I have. I cannot practice. I always end up writing when I practice. I always land in practice land, sorry, in compositional space. So I hope to do something at some point. Yes, I have students who are asking about the Sørensen, how to play that and how to navigate that, and but I don't have anything written down like fingerings or yeah, stuff like that. Also, I find that it changes all the time. Like every morning I pick up the guitar, I start playing at the moment the art of the fugue, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I can get a little bit more of the D happening for a little longer duration if I change the fingerings this way. And then I do that for half an hour, maybe an hour, and then I realize, oh no, wait, the original I have was better. So there's this relationship with the material that is ongoing and very time consuming.
Is there a version of the Art of the Fugue harpsichord keyboard version that you gravitate towards the most and that's inspired you the most?
Yeah, absolutely. The Glenn Gould recording from the Wohltemperature Klavier, that's the one I sort of mirrored, or that's how I could really hear the voices come out. Then there's my favorite one, I think, is there's a recording of him playing in Moscow. It's a live recording, and he plays it even slower than, like, he's already pretty slow compared to many interpreters after him. But this one in Moscow is like super slow. And there the voices really, really come out clearly. And I've been playing along with that one. I've been trying to see, can I get the voices on the guitar to come out even close to what he's able to accomplish on the piano. So those are the two, like the Moscow version and the classic recorded version, which is in better quality. Those are the two ones I've been sort of using. Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to ask you this question because I think of you primarily in this beautiful solo setting and in the jazz trio setting, but we're talking so much about classical music and composing and guitar. Do you have thoughts on guitar ensembles, guitar orchestras, bringing other guitarists on stage with you, or is that just like it doesn't work?
That's a good question. I haven't tried it. I've been so excited about trying to see what solo guitar can do, because I do think the guitar is a young instrument that, I mean, like, what classical music, what any music, composed music, is written for solo electric guitar? Very little. There is some, but so I think that's a super exciting area to see. Are there any corners we haven't dealt with yet? Or, like a guitarist like Ben Monder, I think, has explored the guitar in a way that hasn't been done before, Ben Monder. And maybe there's even more stuff, that we haven't found yet. So I'm so into the idea of like exploring the solo electric guitar. It's an obsession, absolutely.
Remind me, are you coming to the States anytime soon?
At the moment, it's looking like the visas are so incredibly expensive.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'd love to, but they doubled the amount you need to pay a lawyer to work there as a European artist. So it's pretty wild. Like, I'd love to go, but it will cost like thousands of dollars for any European if they want to perform officially in the US.
Wow. And meanwhile, you can go to almost any EU country, right? And it's all fine.
Meanwhile, I can go anywhere in Europe, and the Americans I know, they can go to Europe without visas. So,
Oh,
so
wow.
there's a bit of an imbalance there. It's not been talked about a lot in all these like
Yeah.
trade wars, but there's a music trade war going on that the Americans have won by far. But then again, we Europeans get to, I've toured with Mark Turner and learned
Yeah.
so much from having him touring with my band that it's also amazing for European musicians to be able to bring all these credible players from the US.
What a strange one-way street, though. You would think Europe
Oh,
would be
yeah.
trying to restrict American jazz musicians to promote the locals. Like,
Yes,
I don't think
right?
America is worried about European jazz infiltrating our country, but apparently it's cost prohibitive for you to come out here.
Absolutely, which is a pity because there's so much in the US. I mean, let alone, I mean, I play 100% American guitars, American amps. All my influences are American guitarists. It's yeah.
Is the Bannerhead composition going to be recorded?
I hope so, but I'm trying to find the right project for it. I'm not just gonna throw it at some record. I really want to make sure that it sits in a good place.
Okay. Yeah.
So definitely it will be recorded, but I just have to figure out with who and where. Also because I've done 3 solo albums recently, so it will probably take a minute before I do another one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let me know. Let me know when the visa situation gets easier. We'll try to bring you out to a Fretboard Summit to play that tune. That would be
That would be
amazing.
fantastic. That would be fantastic.
And in the meantime, we're going to be sharing this video that you shot. Do you want to say anything more about the art of the fugue and what went into that?
Yeah, endless hours of problem solving. And then I thought about, because one thing that it's not completely possible uh, due to the logistics of the guitar to actually play the duration of the notes as intended by Bach. if I look at the original score, I can see, okay, there's no way I can get that D ringing because then I can't find the next notes. So a lot of what you're hearing in that version is me trying to create the illusion that that note is still there. And that's the mystery, and that's the crazy thing about being like, I feel like you can't just play the notes and the music. It doesn't work on the guitar. You have to come up with these little tricks, these little solutions, like you can ghost certain things. You can sort of make it sound like something is happening that's not really happening. Some illusionary magic tricks I think you have to pull out to get the sound.
Is that complexity more in the fretting hand or the picking hand?
Oh, it's definitely in both. Like I'm doing it with hybrid picking, which is probably a really bad idea, but I cannot get a full sound by just doing it with my fingers. It's not satisfying for me. I want to be able to have that really direct attack you can get from a pick. So my in-between is this hybrid picking version of it. And the hybrid picking does allow for certain voices to come out. And that's the challenge, I think, by playing that piece. I'm trying to make the 4 individual voices speak out. But there's so many places where you need to, like come up with solutions. Like every corner is like the car is broken down again. You need to put it together from scratch. If you change this one finger, then it destroys the next section. Okay, what about if we move it, to here? So I feel like I'm so happy that I'm done with the construction of it now, but it's gonna change and hopefully get more fluid. And I'm definitely gonna sit with this for a long time still.
Glenn Gould was able to do a couple different interpretations. You certainly should be too.
I hope so. Thanks.
Yeah. As part of your minimalism with gear, no pedals? You don't want to go there, like in terms of trying to get closer to that harpsichord sound?
Well, my pedal board is actually huge.
It is.
Like
okay.
I have a big Mocha analog delay as well where I have the expression pedal tweaking the delay, and that's my sound. If I play live, I always have that with me.
Okay.
I have a Moog tremolo as well that I would use if I can't bring the Magnatone. I think the Moog's tremolo pedals are incredible sounding things. And some reverb. I do have a huge pedal board that, but I also do like to just, like one thing I did practicing the out of the Fugue was I plugged directly into the Magnatone. And this was also, again, from trying to mimic Glenn Gould's approach of not touching the sustain pedal.
Sure.
Because when he would play Bach, he didn't touch it once. He would play the Goldberg variations and not even, although it's available. It's a bit like we guitar players love to add reverb. Of course we do. It sounds great. But what happens if you don't? What if you just go straight to the amp? Then every tone production needs to come from the fingers. And for me, when I did that, I could zoom in on details that I wasn't aware of when I was playing with the pedals. So that really, it was like going to school again, if it really, So I think there's a nice challenge and some fun there to be had, just going straight into the amp.
You showed restraint in the video we're sharing, but have you tried the Art of the Fugue just with that amp cranked really loud?
No, I haven't actually. Actually, it could be fun. Yeah,
it might bring out some effects that are hidden in that amp.
I actually find this a challenge when playing live, that everything I do is done at practice room volume at home. And I can find that balance between having the electric guitar sounding very acoustic. And then I go out live and you add volume, and often I feel like, whoa, this sound that's a lot more difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
All right. But I might try to bring it out on the balcony and play it for the neighbors and see.
Yeah. Do you have any neighbors who don't like you playing? Because you play out on that balcony a lot. Do you have any haters?
No, it was, it was in lockdown and people were in their homes and it sounded great on the
Yeah.
balcony. It's like talk about natural reverb and reflection. I couldn't believe the sound. Like my neighbor's house is on the other side. We have this big courtyard. So the reflection happening there was like such a cool sound. Yeah. So no, I didn't have any of that. Also, I mean, people had nothing else to do, right? So why not?
Here in America, somebody would have complained or called the authorities or something, no matter how
Really?
beautiful it was. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like 3 minutes every night. That was it. Yeah.
Well, Mikkel, thank you so much. I mean, thank you for letting us share this video too. I mean, that's
Oh,
cool that
thank
we were able to
you.
put it on our YouTube channel. And thank you for sharing your story, and definitely keep us posted if any more videos or recordings or anything come out. I mean, a whole composition about a banner head, that's right up our alley.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, those banners and John's story about those banners, that's something special, I think. John Thomas' story about the Kalamazoo girls. It's really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jason. It's I love the podcast. Been listening to so many of these episodes for years on, so I feel like I know all you guys about Fretboard Journal and all these people, although I live far away from everybody.
Come visit when that visa thing clears up.
Yeah, let's see when the next presidency takes over. Maybe there'll be a change. Maybe it'll be like 10 times as expensive.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, I don't know that European jazz musicians who are touring are high on either presidential candidates' priorities, but you never know.
No, we don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jason.
All right, that was my conversation with Mikkel. I hope you learned a lot. I certainly did. Thanks as always, everybody, for tuning in to the Fretboard Journal podcast, for listening to me talk to this eclectic array of players from around the world. It is so much fun. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, share the episode with your friends. It goes a long way towards helping this podcast grow.